Thinking Liberty, episode 21.
Welcome to Thinking Liberty, the podcast that explores lifestyles of freedom-minded individuals. Join us as we discuss work, hobbies, health, learning, and more while living a travel-orientated lifestyle. Be curious, be open, be inspired, be free. And now, here are your hosts, Zach and Sarah Varnell.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thinking Liberty. We're coming to you from our mobile studio, still here in Bass Harbor, Maine. I'm Zach.
And I'm Sarah, and we're enjoying what time we have left here in Bass Harbor. We're just here for the rest of the week, and then we're going to start heading back towards Pennsylvania to visit family again before we...
We're going to have one busy weekend of driving.
Yeah, it'll be long, but it'll be okay. It'll be a fun adventure.
Well, it's the perfect weather right now up here to
Yes,
be able
definitely.
to pull off, at some stop and just sleep in the RV for the night, not hooked up or anything.
Yeah, because we're not big boondockers. I don't think we have the right power equipment yet, and we haven't really explored that option too much yet.
I don't think it's quite as big of a thing on the East Coast either. I see a
Yeah.
lot of people in the West doing it.
Yeah, there's more space to be able to do it, and more picturesque places to just kind of park, and there you go. And there's so many parks out here that there really doesn't seem like a need to for us. But yeah, so we're trying to enjoy as much of Maine as we have time left to do so, and just exploring all the things that are here. On Saturday, we actually did a little nighttime kayak tour to experience the bioluminescence, and it was out in Castine, Maine, probably about an hour and a half from where we are. So a little bit of a drive, but it was totally worth it. They call it like a sunset moonlit bioluminescence tour. Our guide was telling us that sometimes, the moon's too bright and you're not really able to see much, but it was perfect for us. I mean, the moon was really bright, but it was a magical experience. I mean, it was just so cool. Our paddles would move things, and the canoe would move things, and the water would just kind of sparkle and glow, and we even stopped at one point to kind of stargaze, and our guide pointed out several constellations and stuff, and that was pretty cool too. She was calling them, so what it is the bioluminescence, for those who might not know, it's a microorganism that
I'm not even sure that I know, and I was there.
that lives in the ocean, and it feeds off of certain, I think, like algae that are in the water. And so where Castine sits, it's in this little bay, and there's like a little channel. And so the water flows in and out twice a day of this little channel. And she was explaining to us that the currents are just right, and the water temperature is just right, and the bay traps their food. And so it's just like the perfect environment for them. Even at the dock, when the water was like hitting the dock a little bit, you could see it. I mean, they were everywhere. It was so
light
cool.
up like a firefly.
Yeah, she was calling them the fireflies of the ocean, and that's what it felt and looked like. When she first said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a cool name. But apparently the reason why they're called that is because they have the same organic chemical that fireflies have. So they have the same thing that makes them light up and glow. So that's why they're called that.
Yeah, and I expected them to be really tiny to where maybe you didn't see each individual glow, but you would see the group of them glow. But they were actually a little bit bigger than I expected, like maybe a pin's head. I don't know which side of the pin you are referring to when you say that, but the thicker part of a pin, like a safety pin or something.
I mean, I'd say it
Not a
was pretty
safety pin.
varied. I mean, there were some really small ones, and then there were some bigger ones. So
Yeah, but I was
that
surprised.
really
I thought they
helped.
were all going to be like bacteria sized, and we'd
Yeah.
see maybe like a
where you
general
just
glow.
see like the after effect of the glow or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
no, it was so cool. I mean, it was almost like there were stars above us and stars below us. It was just, and I actually got to see a couple times where it looked like a couple of them were sticking to the other people in the group's paddles. So that was kind of cool to see their paddles going up and down with glowing on them.
Yeah, and the stargazing there was really good too, even though the moon was about 3/4 full and shining a lot of light. Yeah, and the stars were still very visible and very stark compared to the night sky here. It seems to be extra black. So we were able to just about see everything you're usually able to see, but way better. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know if this makes sense too, but it also felt like the stars were a lot closer. Did you feel like that too?
I don't
Like when
know.
we were looking at the Big Dipper, it felt like it was way closer.
Yeah, I guess
Maybe it's
so.
just the time of year. Maybe it's not actually our location. We are not astronomers, so we don't know enough about this to talk about it very well. But it was a really cool experience. It was like, I think we were out there about 3.5 hours. And so it was a pretty lengthy tour, and it was tiring, and we were sore at the end, but it was so much fun. And definitely want to do more kayaking in the future. Cough, cough, hint, hint.
Yeah. And then the next day, even though we were tired and sore from that, still, we went on a little hike up Acadia Mountain.
Little hike.
Yeah. It was another one of those where it was technically a short hike, but a lot of elevation gain, so it was still pretty hard.
Yeah,
But
in some points it was basically like a straight up climb. I think we tend to have pretty good luck with this, but we ended up taking the right path up and the right path down the mountain because some of the parts coming down were just like straight down, and I'm sure that would have been a difficult climb up because it was a difficult climb down for me, but it was so much fun. I mean, there's like, woods hiking and like normal trail hiking, and then there's areas where there's roots everywhere, and then there's rocky parts, and then you get to the top and there's just like you're standing on a big boulder on top of this mountain, and you really kind of can't believe how high up you are because it didn't seem to be that far of a distance. I think we were out there about 4.5 hours total hiking, and so it was just like, but the time that it took you to get up was because it was so steep. So you didn't really feel like you were going that much distance. But then when you get up to the top and you look around and you're so high, like we were seeing the tops of the other mountains far off. And it was just so cool because you could see the ocean from the top of a mountain. And that was really like blowing my mind.
it looked like a vintage postcard. I mean,
Yeah.
you had, woods, mountains, the ocean with sailboats and docks and lobster traps and all this stuff. It just looked like it was planned to look that beautiful.
Yeah, and the pine trees. I just love the pine trees up here too. I mean, it's just, I don't know, everything was so picture perfect, and it's not, full blown fall tree wise here yet. Some of the leaves are changing, and so you can see a little bit of reds and auburns and some browns and stuff like that, but it's not full blown yet. I'm guessing probably that'll be next week here, just because I think the summer was so warm. But the little bit that you could see, and then when the sun started to set, it just put a golden glow over everything, and I was just like, I don't ever want to leave here, but we knew we had to start moving down if we wanted to make it out before it got too dark.
Yeah. So, any more updates from us, or should we move on to introducing our guest?
Yeah, that's a good segue actually, talking about the fall leaves color, because our guest, she is a photographer.
I thought you were saying my segue was good. I'm like, I just asked a question.
No, mine was good, Zach.
Yeah.
Um,
Congratulating yourself over there.
and her specialty, she loves taking photographs of the leaves changing and just getting those great autumn shots. And one of the things that she'll talk about too is, she has a lot of training and a lot of years of experience, and so she knows, what equipment works best for her, and she knows all the proper settings. But one of the things she talks about is just making sure to be ready to take the shot. I feel like we talk to all these people and we're talking about, what advice they have and things like that. And it's just been really cool to be able to start applying some of these things in our own lives because, we've just been, I feel like in the last couple of weeks since we've spoken to her, we've really made more of an effort to just get the shot and see what happens. Be prepared and be ready and have your camera. And even if it's just your phone, just take the time to try to get the shot, because There is something to be said for just enjoying the moment and being in the moment and seeing everything that's around you. And we definitely have done a lot of that, just soaking in the views and the experiences that we've been able to have and partake of in Maine. Especially kayaking. It was nighttime and we definitely didn't take any photos. We were cold and just sitting there and enjoying everything and just being in the moment. But other times when you're hiking and you see that cute little mushroom or the cute little squirrel, just take the photo and see how it turns out, and don't be afraid that it won't be perfect or that you might have to make somebody wait a few seconds for you. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to using like a more, and I don't know anything about photography, so I'm sure I'll mess up terms, but like the DSLR type cameras or like the more professional looking one with the lens. Sometimes, I feel way out of my place even trying to use your camera like that because I don't know anything about photography really. I've never owned one of those before and I'm just kind of learning my way around yours. But speaking to April, even though, I can tell she's a good photographer and very experienced, it did make me feel a little bit better about at least, getting it out and playing with it and seeing what type of photos I did come up with, even if I am just using the automatic settings or anything. And then when we were hiking, I did think I got a pretty cool picture of a red squirrel here. They were allowing me to get entirely too close to it, so that helped.
While chattering the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so April, leads some small groups on tours to different parts of the country. And did you say there was one to Canada that you were looking at?
I think Alaska.
Alaska. Yeah, so different parts of the country to do little photo tours, and she helps arrange, where you stay and some fun things to do and excursions and things like that. So definitely check those out, and yeah, we'll let her tell you more about it.
Yeah, so let's jump into our interview with April Bielefeldt of Fall Photo Trips.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a very busy fall schedule, so we appreciate you making the time to come on our show today.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Sarah and Zach. Thanks.
So you're a travel photographer, and I just find that so fascinating because you get to combine, art with traveling. But how did you get started with travel photography? Like, what drove you to become interested in it?
Well, I kind of started photographing as a kid. My grandfather took a lot of pictures, and then my parents, we used to take a lot of family vacations in the summer. So my dad gave me a little Kodak point and shoot camera. It had the old little film cartridges you put in there, and then you'd have to wait until your film got developed. So I've always had an interest in photography. And then in college, I did get a degree and I went into fashion design. I went into graphic design for a while, and ultimately came out with just a fine art degree with a minor in fashion design, but continued just my love of travel. So it's still something I'm really, that's what I'm most passionate about, but it doesn't completely pay my bills. But I started taking other people with me when I would share I'd come back with these photographs from New England in the fall or the Northern Lights in Alaska and just all of these, or even California. California has such a diverse landscape that, others started to get interested and they're like, oh my gosh, so that's just kind of where it started. And that's where I've started to build it from. And creating the trips is just as much fun, and seeing the joy of sharing these places, off the beaten path places, like the Salton Sea in California, just places that you may not always think about or find on your own. So that's kind of where it started. And like I said, I just hope to continue to pursue that passion and turn it into something more full-time.
So you mentioned a few destinations there. Do you have any places that you think are just so beautiful that you frequent there to take pictures?
Yes, actually, I go back to New England every fall. I think the fall foliage in New England combined with the small towns, the, white steeple churches, the covered bridges, kind of the iconic idea that we have maybe from literature and children's stories is in Vermont. There's other places that get fall colors. California, you've got the Sierras that get the color, but A lot of other places, unfortunately, don't have the sugar maples that turn that bright red. And for me, it's just that pop of red color and the carpet. You've got the oranges, the yellows, the reds, and, some greens thrown in there that makes, I think that's what makes New England so special. Like I said, paired with the subject matter, instead of just, you can see some wonderful trees on their own, but when you can combine an image with a little red barn or like I said, a white steepled church, and kind of just get those storybook images that, we've grown up with, or some of us have at least. I think that's what makes that extra special. And it changes from year to year. The year that they got hit, and Vermont kind of sits inland, so they didn't say get a direct hit from the hurricane, but they had the water that washed out a lot of, I think they lost 3 covered bridges that year. And the salt from the rain and so forth really did make a difference in the tree color. So since the trees rely on nature, it really can vary. One year you go to a location and, like for me, I get really excited and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's sometimes this bright red tree next to the covered bridge. And then you go the following fall and maybe you miss it by a few days, or just Mother Nature, the tree may not be red that particular year and the leaves have fallen off, but you have something else to photograph. So the nice thing about New England is there's a lot packed into a small area. So when you live in somewhere like Texas or California, where you have to travel great distances and you get used to driving many, many miles to maybe get to a destination, in New England, you can just go down a different little road and end up finding something else that's just as amazing to photograph. So I often surprise myself, even after going there the last 15 years to photograph, with making a wrong turn or seeing someone else's photograph. I mean, Instagram is a great resource now for people if they're going somewhere to look up an area and find things that they weren't, previous to the internet, maybe not aware that, oh yeah, there's a wonderful pond there that gets reflections in the afternoon, or, different things to photograph.
Yeah, it's really smart, and that's one thing I was actually about to ask is, I don't have any clue about professional photography, so I've always wondered how people find these great locations. Because, whenever I see something that I think would make a pretty picture, there's usually 40 other people there taking a picture of it, so it doesn't feel very special.
Right, right. Well, and that's true too. You do run into that now with the internet, is places that once just a few people showed up to, now, like if you try to photograph the iconic lighthouse in Acadia National Park in Maine, the one that sits out on the rocks, you need to get there early. You need to plan ahead for that day. I've gone there in the fall, and you need to get there a few hours before the sunset, actually, just to get yourself positioned. And a lot of photography, a lot of those beautiful images, a lot of it is time spent waiting or going back to a location more than one evening, just to get that quote, amazing photograph that you see. So there's a little bit, there's always luck involved as well, but plan as much as you can, especially on the popular spots. Yosemite's another one. They get the firefall, and it's in February when the light hits the top of the waterfall just the right way at sunset and makes it look like fire coming down the side of the face of the mountain. You get a field full of people, and I've had friends that literally have said, oh, I show up in the afternoon, get my chair out, bring a book, basically camp out for a few hours to keep that specific spot they want to line up the picture they are hoping to capture.
Yeah, I actually told Zach that next year I want to go to the Firefall because I was just reading about that and it sounds so
Oh, were you?
breathtaking.
Yeah, it is. It is really breathtaking. And make your reservations early so you can stay in the valley, and that way you can just walk from, there's the lodge that's next to the falls there. So then everything's kind of within walking distance and makes it
Oh,
easy
that's a
instead of
good idea.
driving in and out of the park all the time.
Yeah, and we're actually in Maine right now, and the leaves have started changing, and fall is my favorite season. I love everything about it. So you're actually inspiring me to want to break out my camera and go try
Oh,
to track down some
yeah.
good shots.
So where are you at in Maine? Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous.
We are in Old Orchard Beach
Okay.
near Portland, and then
Mm-hmm.
next week we'll actually be moving to Acadia National Park.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I wanted to be up here for the fall leaf changing too. So when I saw that one of your specialties is the autumn leaf photography travel trips. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Um,
And if
so
you
I've been
haven't picked
browsing their
up,
websites.
there's a photographer, her name is Colleen Minnick Sperry. She put out a whole book on photographing Acadia. She took advantage of several of the parks have an artist in residence program. So if you go to their website, you can look for these. If you're someone that, again, you're looking for an opportunity to have food and lodging and your basics covered and can get away for a few weeks, you can apply for these artist and residence programs, whether you're a painter or a photographer, or maybe even some of them, writers as well, or videographers. And if you get accepted, then you can stay in the park, various seasons. And she's done that, I know, many times. I don't know the exact number, and then she put out a wonderful book, and so that's a good resource if you are headed up to Arcadia.
That's really cool. Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely check
Hmm.
that out.
Yeah, and we'll have
Yeah,
those links on our show notes page for anybody who maybe didn't catch that. They can go there and find it.
right.
Yeah, so besides photography, I heard you blog and write for journals and things like that.
Yeah, I do a little writing and blogging for various different publications. I also have clients that contact me that they're going to New England, let's say, and they want something custom. So I'll put together, help them pick out their lodgings, and they'll do the final booking. But again, kind of pace it to what they're looking for. There's a lot of us, we don't want to join a tour as such because we fear getting caught up in that, well, first they're going to make me go here and then I'm going to be on a bus. And, we want to have that time to ourselves to kind of really take it at our own pace, or, sleep in one morning and get up early a different morning. So I do have a lot of clients that I'll write something specific for them if they're going to Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine or any of the places that I normally go, and give them ideas for things depending too on their interests, because sometimes you'll have someone, especially couples, often I find you'll have one person that's really interested in photography and loves to get up early, and then the other person is like, well, I need a little shopping time or this or that. So then it's trying to find a balance of things for both people so you can keep them both happy.
That's cool. So it's like custom itineraries almost, and you're
Yeah, it is
the travel
custom
companion.
itineraries.
All right.
Yeah.
So, what have been some of your favorite shots and your stories with those?
Well, there's been several. One of them actually, when I was competing more with my images, I don't often enter images in competition quite as much anymore. Just there's an expense to that and just the rigors of preparing a particular image. But one evening I was in Santa Monica walking, and I always take my camera with me, even if I'm with friends or my husband or whatnot. And I was walking on the bluff, and the sun was just starting to kind of go down. It was getting to that magic hour that we all love, like sunset hour. And there was this scraggly kind of tree kind of hanging onto the bluff and over the cliff. And then you could see the pier in the distance with all the lights of the Ferris wheel and whatnot. So I took my camera. I didn't have my tripod with me, but I carefully balanced it on, there's a fence there, and held it and took a few shots. And then I did enter one of those, and several of the judges won the competition and got best of show. So, and it was just one of those magic moments where you knew when you pressed the shutter that something magical was happening. Just the way the light was hitting the tree, and then just the twinkle of the lights, just all the elements of the composition and the lighting were all coming together. And just the story it was kind of telling of, nature trying to hang on as development continues in an area such as Los Angeles or places that are really popular. Nature's kind of clinging onto around the edges. And as that bluff continues to recede, I actually go back and visit, quote, my tree. I call it my tree. Go back and revisit and see if my tree is still hanging on, because they keep having to move the bluff back as we have, washes, and, the cliff kind of slides down at various times. So that was one of my favorite
Right.
images. And it just was really special to me that, I saw the moment start to happen. And sometimes you see something start to happen and you're with other people, and there's that hesitancy of like, well, I should, we're walking to dinner, or I should do this. And that particular evening, I just said, no, I got to run over and I got to spend some time over here and get this. And I was so thankful I did. So that's an image that it's hanging on my wall. I just look at it and have wonderful memories of that particular day and of a place that I really enjoy. So.
It sounds really magical.
Yeah, it was. It was. So, and those moments happen. You can't always prepare for those, and that was one of those where it just came out of nowhere. It was, somewhere, and often the time, sometimes that is the challenge, especially when you go back to places like you go back to Vermont each fall, and you want to share the best places, which are often, the iconic rolling hills and the red barns, and you've been there many times. That sometimes you start to like not see new things sometimes. So you have to sometimes kind of look and dig, and other times you just kind of have to relax and let it happen and not put so much pressure on, like, well, I have to get an image, I have to come back with something, because often the magic just happens. Like this particular evening, I was not looking for an image. It just happened. And those I think are the really special moments when you're not actually out hunting, that you allow magic to happen.
Yeah, you're not forcing the moment or
Right,
forcing the image to work.
right,
It kind of does.
exactly.
So it sounds like you go to New England a lot, and you've done Alaska several times, and you're from California. Are there any other destinations or locations that you love to go to shoot?
Oh, yes. In the spring, I've been a couple times in the South to Charleston and Savannah. I'd like to return there. And then the other place for fall color that's kind of not so well known, I mean, some photographers do go there, obviously, or people that live there, is the Lake Superior, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's a lot less towns, there's a lot less population, so there's not as many of the great, bed and breakfasts and restaurants and coffee shops that we've gotten accustomed to in other places. But the forests and the leaves, you've got waterfalls, and Lake Superior itself is just incredible. It's lake is not really the proper way to describe it, other than it is surrounded on all sides, but it's more like an ocean. I mean, it creates its own weather systems. You get these incredible waves and beaches. In fact, I did print an image at sunset on the beach of Lake Superior, and I was showing it at a local hospital because there's a place that we can show our images. And a woman kept asking, I don't remember what I put the title on it, but she's like, I swear that's the ocean. That's got to be the ocean. I'm like, you know what? It can be whatever you want, but it's actually Lake Superior. It has waves. But yeah, so that's another area I would actually really like to fit back in. I've gone there. I try to go there every other year or so, but it just depends on the schedule of, unfortunately, the fall season goes so quickly. The leaves change so fast. It's fleeting, and to be in all places at one time is, it's just physically impossible. So.
Cool. So you mentioned earlier that you were, at least trying to make photography or fund your traveling a little bit. So in what ways are you able to sort of monetize your passion of photography?
Mainly it's through the photography tours that I do in the fall, and the smaller tours that I do throughout the year in California. So I have a meetup group. The meetup group is photo day trippers and tours for women. And I post things there, and then I also put things on my website, Fall Photo Trips, and then my new site is Eyes for the Road. And we'll do like 3-day trips to, say, the Salton Sea. Sometimes we've done Yosemite, the 395. You can go up to Bodie and Mono Lake, and the coast, the California coast, offers a lot of opportunities for photography. The desert, there's just many, many locations, luckily, that are fairly within reason for a 3-day trip in California. So it's really the tours that kind of fund what I do at the moment as far as the photography, and then the itineraries is the other big portion of that. And then I have started to submit more often to publications to try to get some more published articles. It's just, to be honest, the writing's a little bit slower than creating the tours and actually taking people and working out in the field. I think the easiest way to learn, I mean, the digital cameras have made it so much faster for people to learn, and the cell phones just continue to get better and better. In fact, I've had some participants take their cell phone and just showing them simple ways to compose a picture better, or using some of their settings that are on these new phones. I mean, they've returned with some amazing photos that then they can print and hang on their wall, and you then relive those wonderful memories of these beautiful places. And again, continue that passion for saving the natural areas that we have throughout the United States. So it's mainly the tours
Sweet.
and writing the itineraries at this point that help fund my travels.
It's so cool that you're able to take what you've learned in the field, working in photography, and bring that into other people who want to learn more and experience more. Have there been any like best and worst experiences that you've had that maybe you use as part of your teaching or training, that you can share with us?
Sure. I think when you're working with people, it's always important to find someone, and especially when it's a combination of travel and photography that I kind of tend to focus on. It's important. There's so many, and that's the beauty, I think, today too. There's so many more options for people if they're interested in traveling to really find something that caters to their interests, whether it's food or cultures or writing. There's just a palette of various different types of travel and tours that they can do. And the biggest thing is for both parties, is making sure that the people that are on the trip are enjoying themselves and having a good time. But also, if you're looking to take a trip, asking the right questions and all of that. So, unfortunately, I did have one experience where someone signed up for the tour, and I think it was like 2 days in, all of a sudden, and maybe it truly was a work commitment. She's a very busy food photographer, but after a few days, she's like, you know what, I'm not feeling very good. Do you mind if, where's the closest airport? And I took that kind of personal, but I needed to realize that it wasn't probably me personally, but it was probably a benefit to the others on the group too. That if she wasn't really getting what she wanted from the trip or the learning or the experiences, because I kind of combined the photography and the traveling with, local stops, as far as like, we're not just going to eat at McDonald's, which some photography tours do that to maximize their time. But for me, it's experiencing all aspects of an area. Like if it's Vermont, the cheese is so great, and they've got so many craft beers and, you know, pumpkin cider donuts, or, different things that are local to that area. To me, it's part of the experience of, you want to seek some of those farms out. And it's a dual, because oftentimes those are small family run farms that have been there for many, generations. And not only are you going to get some great photography opportunities that are a little bit different than your standard just pull over by the side of the road or go to the places that everyone else writes about in the books, or you see online, but you also get that interaction of meeting locals and trying things that are local to that area. So that was the only time that it kind of was maybe a little bit eye-opening. But what I learned from that is to make sure in chatting with people when they're interested in a tour is to really, for me, ask the right questions, and hopefully they're honest with themselves too in asking or knowing what they're looking for when they sign up for, when you're traveling for a week with other people.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's neat that you're making these little curated experiences too, because I mean, like you said, you're taking the time and the money to travel. You don't want to waste time just stopping into, a quick fast food joint. You really want to experience the local culture and really,
Right.
experience the trip completely. So do you have any tips or advice? How do you travel with your equipment and keep it safely going from, point A to point B?
Um, the important part is I never check any photography gear. So that can be a little bit of a challenge to make sure that you can pack, look at the airline if you're having to fly. like often, obviously, I'm flying from California to Vermont, or, and sometimes if it's a secondary airport, it may be a smaller airplane where they're going to gate check your larger bag. Maybe you were able to fit the larger bag in the overhead and then your camera bag under your seat, but make sure that, really check the dimensions and be prepared that, your camera body, your memory cards, things that are really valuable, the batteries are, in the bag that's going to stay with you. The way I look at it and I tell people is, most everywhere we go, we can stop and replace a sweatshirt or pick up an extra pair of gloves, or, if your bag gets delayed, usually they can catch it up with you, the next day or something. But your camera gear, you just really don't want to see that get damaged. And the other thing is make use of that. If you actually use an actual camera bag, oftentimes I suggest like cover up the label. I use just a basic school backpack for my camera gear, which may sound odd, but then I just really have little different bags and pouches that I wrap all the individual lenses into. But then that bag isn't screaming expensive camera gear. When I'm walking through an airport, it's not saying Canon or Nikon all over it, just advertising that, I'm walking around with a lot of expensive gear. I've never had a problem, but I do have friends that travel internationally. And so I think it is important to just get in the habit, because once you establish those habits, they stick with you of, taking time to, like I said, even changing out your camera straps. So that, again, you're not advertising, big name brands that, in a lot of people's minds, it equals money. And when you're going places, it's important to just be aware of what you're doing. Even in the United States, there's, you don't want to give an opportunity if there doesn't need to be one as such. I always wrap extra socks. It's an easy thing to do. Wrap your extra socks and some of your warm gloves and things around your lenses to extra, protect them. Take small things like extra lens wipes, things to clean your gear with. Those are some quick tips. The tripod tends to be the most challenging, and you'll want to make sure if you're purchasing a tripod, to measure your suitcase and make sure that it can fit into your bag. Or the other thing I've done sometimes, and sometimes it's worth it, is just ship your tripod ahead to your first, the place you're going to stay at first, and just call your lodging. If it's somebody that's traveling with me, I'll just call the place the first night that we're staying and say, hey, there's some boxes that may show up. Those are our tripods. Can you just tuck them away in a safe place for a few days until we get there? And everywhere I've stayed, again, it's establishing those relationships and working with where you're staying. They have no problem, doing that for you. They're looking forward to having you stay with them, and they'll take care of your extra tripod and until you get there, because that's usually the largest piece of equipment. But the new mirrorless lenses and the new mirrorless cameras offer a lot smaller options too for people that are, going to be doing a lot of travel and travel photography.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the same advice that I do when I travel for work, because I'm having to bring lots of computer equipment with me. So I always pack it only in a backpack, never in anything with wheels, because sometimes those get checked
Yeah,
at the gate. And I don't check anything that could
right.
break, or, I really don't even want it out of my sight. I'd rather, hold on to it the whole time. So I can definitely see with
Agreed.
camera equipment it'd be the
Yeah.
same way. So you mentioned too with mirrorless being, smaller and easier for travel. So do you have separate equipment that you use when you're traveling, and maybe some you use around home, or you just kind of
Yeah, actually, I do somewhat. I have a little bit different gear that I travel with. I got one of the new Sony puts out, well, a lot of the manufacturers now are the mirrorless cameras have really advanced in the technology, and even the point and shoot cameras. A lot of professional photographers I talk to are using the point and shoots. It's really reading what type of photography you're interested in to match it to the best options out there. But you don't necessarily need, quote, one of the large DSLRs with the interchangeable lenses. You can get a lot of great images with the mirrorless cameras. The bodies are a lot smaller, they're a lot lighter. The lenses tend to be the expense right now still with the mirrorless, but there's a lot of options too with even just the point and shoots that have a zoom lens attached to them. So it kind of depends on, if you're going to go photograph animals, you're obviously going to need a larger lens to zoom in and capture them, so you're not having to stand right next to the animals, but you can be, some distance and get a good image of, say, or some of the Alaskan wildlife, that type of thing. But yeah, I've started using the Sony. I picked up the Sony when I was in Alaska doing night photography, and the ISOs and the speeds, I mean, you can really get some incredible images even hand holding some of these mirrorless cameras. So it's really exciting, the continued changes in technology. And you don't always have to pay, you don't always have to get the newest thing out there. Do a little bit of reading on the internet. YouTube has great videos. You can go on, a lot of times on sites like Flickr, a lot of the photographers will post what camera they were using to capture that image. Even on Facebook, there's whole pages dedicated to just Sony users, so you can kind of see what types of images you can get with that camera. And then, look on, there's a lot of sites, obviously Amazon runs sales, but even eBay, you can really do some hunting and reading and pick up maybe someone's model from last year that they haven't used much and save yourself some money and end up with a great camera.
That's really good advice to look up and to really do research before you buy anything. Do you have one piece of equipment or a tool, software that you couldn't do without?
Well, besides the camera, um, I think pretty much the camera. I mean, the camera is it. And like I said, even if it's a cell phone, just always, it's what's in your hand at the moment. I mean, you could be walking down the street and seeing something amazing, but if you don't have something to capture it with, even if it's the cell phone that's with you, it's always whatever you've got in hand at that moment. And just your eyes, learning to see, learning to, once you start seeing what's out there and you start to take photographs, I think you become more aware. You instantly see details that you weren't even aware of previously. I mean, that's what people, just even walking, like if you live in a city, we drive down streets going to work all of the time. But if we actually stop and park the car on a Saturday and walk that distance, it's amazing the little, maybe the murals you see, or, a little flower trying to grow out of the concrete, just the little details that get missed in the, rush of our daily lives. So I see that all the time when people start to pick up the camera, their eye really, and that's the joy of it, the joy of going out even with other people, no matter what level of, if they've just started taking pictures and they started an Instagram account, they see something. We can all be standing there staring at the same three red barns and the beautiful fall trees and the cows on the hillside. And it's so much fun to see what each person, took and looked at through their lens, and the photograph that they, post or that they share. It's just, that's the joy of it, because we all see so differently based on either our past experiences or just what interests us. And it's just so
That's so
exciting.
true.
Yeah. And that's the fun of it.
So it sounds like it's less about the equipment and more about just having it with you and being ready for anything.
Yes. Yes.
Well, so what piece of advice or one piece of advice would you have for somebody who maybe is already into photography but wants to get into traveling and travel photography? How would you suggest someone make that leap?
Well, if they're looking to do travel photography, maybe to make some money or to afford their travels, there's a lot of different ways they might be able to do that. There's a lot of places where you can do volunteer vacations. I recently met a photographer who spent time, I believe, in Thailand working with an elephant refuge program. So they spent a lot of time with the elephants, but then they also had free time as well. So they were able to, have their room and board covered again and then explore, or submitting your images. If you have an interest in animals, spending time just observing the patterns of wildlife and then offering those images to, say, National Geographic or Smithsonian. It's amazing that just by reaching out and making contacts, what may come your way. I know of a few people that have done that. Hey, I was out shooting the last 3 days watching these hawks come and go out of this nest or whatnot, and I took all these photographs. Would you like to have them? And they may get published, and then your name gets out there. So that's an opportunity. Oftentimes there's always a lot of photo contests. The internet is pretty full of them, but look for the ones that really might get your name out there, and really look at who the judges are, and then do a little bit of research on the type of work that the judge has previously done, because that may give you a clue as to how they're going to look at the images in the competition. I know in the past that's been a little bit of a help to me. It may not always work, but if you know a particular judge, it has an affinity for nature photographs, or tends to like something that's a little different and maybe not follow, quote, some of the rules of composition, so you need to look for something a little different out of your images to submit. That may be helpful. Join a local group. There's oftentimes Meetup is a great place to meet other photographers and improve your photography skills. Instagram is incredible, of course. Just there's so many different communities and getting your work out there. Magazines, there's so many places now that are looking for content, that by taking the images and spending a little time to find places for them, you'd probably be really surprised where you may end up with that. And then just keep doing what you love. Don't give up. I think that's the important thing, is to keep pursuing your passion.
Awesome. That sounds like great advice. So tell us again about the projects you have going on, your photo tour and your website, just where people can maybe see pictures that you've taken, any of that.
Oh, sure. I've got photographs on Flickr. That's a site where everyone can post their photos. It's free. They also have paid programs as well. And then Fine Art America, where you can post photographs, and that's a great place too, even if you've just started taking pictures, to post your photos and try to sell them. They let you upload the photos, and then they take a portion of the price, but people can print out photo cards, and you don't actually have to do the work. The person can go on the website and choose an image, and if they want a tote bag or whatever items you've selected to let your image be used on. So I'm on Fine Art America. I also recently started my own podcast, which is Eyes for the Road, and I interview a lot of other photographers and destinations that might be of interest to places to photograph. And meetup.com, I've got the meetup group, Tours for Women and Day Trippers. And Instagram, it's Fall Photo Trips. And my websites are fallphototrips.com, eyesfortheroad.com. And then my older site is yourphototravelguide.com. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Right.
I did do a fall guide on MPix quite some time ago, and that link, I believe, is on both my websites as well. So, and that's some information if you're going to New England and you want something that's already put together. Gives you some photography tips, gives you a few places to go photograph. So it's just a quick little guide that you can print and take with you.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So I guess that's all we had. Did you have something else to add, or?
No, I don't think I had anything else. I was a great interview. Thank you so much, you
Oh,
guys.
thank you.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening, and a big thank you to April for coming on the show and sharing her story and journey with photography. We hope that you guys really enjoyed this episode as much as we did. It was so much fun getting to hear about her travels and her tours with photography. Definitely look into those and see if maybe there's a trip that you might want to take. She seems like a really fun person to travel with. And be sure to check out her Instagram and Flickr as well. We'll link to those in the show notes page. I think her Instagram is Fall Photo Trips.
And she has fallphototrips.com. And then she mentions her podcast is Eyes for the Road. And I'm definitely going to check that out. And then her Flickr, I don't really know how Flickr does their designations or their searches, but I saw her on there was just April Bielefeldt.
Yeah, we'll link to it so you can
Yeah.
find it. But definitely check out her gallery because she has some pretty cool shots up there.
And it'll all be in the show notes page at thinkingliberty.com/21. So, and then while you're at it, as usual, please go and like Thinking Liberty on Facebook, Twitter. I guess that's it. I started that like it was going to be some long list, but that's really it.
Well, go to iTunes and leave us a review.
Yeah, we got another couple reviews. We really appreciate that. And it looks like iTunes is actually starting to fix stuff a little bit so that reviews make a difference and get you seen by more people. Although it's still a little bit insane where I go on there and I look at the top podcasts, and some of them like have bad reviews, less reviews, and or even like descriptions that are written by people who don't have a very firm grasp of English, and they're still in like the top 200 charts. So I don't know, maybe they have like amazing
There are some
podcast
other
content.
factors. Yeah, there's gotta be.
Who knows?
But a big thank you to Kaki, who was one of our previous guests. She left us a fantastic review, and it touched us so much, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, Kaki, for that.
Yeah, so I guess that's it for this week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Liberty. Subscribe to the show for free on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher at thinkingliberty.com. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, articles by Zach and Sarah, and more. We'll see you next time.